So as Brian said, so my name's Rodney Buike. I'm a senior cybersecurity specialist at Microsoft, focusing mostly on modern workplace. So think Windows, Office 365, mobile devices, things like that. Compliance is part of that as well. I'm the team lead. I'm hiring. If you're a compliance specialist, please come talk to me desperately. But I'm actually not really here to talk too much about Microsoft technologies. You're probably, get ready for a talk on Office 365 or something like that. But really only have kind of 20, 25 minutes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about social engineering, how it's changed, what we see today, if things really have changed, but also look at sort of how the attacks have evolved and how defenses have evolved as well. So there might be a little bit of Microsoft talk, but in general, we're not going to see too much of that today. So. Does anybody know who this is? Sorry, it's a really bad picture from the internet. Any guesses? No? He was a very successful lawyer. He was a doctor as well, a prison guard, airline pilot. So he's also one of the most prolific social engineers in history. He was in a movie about him, Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abagnale Jr. He was able to successfully become an airline pilot and fly around the world and cash paychecks from Pan American. He was able to become a doctor and had a successful practice as a doctor and a lawyer. And in the movie, he was played by Leonardo DiCaprio, but he also played the French police detective who actually caught him in the movie. So that's kind of an interesting fact. But he was so good at what he did that about 5 years into his prison sentence, he was let out, and the FBI hired him as a consultant. So now he is, and still is, one of the leading consultants on counterfeiting in the world. This guy is probably a little bit more familiar if you're familiar with sort of computer hacking and social engineering. This is Kevin Mitnick. So this is his mugshot on the cover of, I think it was the New York Times, where he still had not been caught, but eventually he was. He was one of the first to use sort of the combination of computer systems and social engineering, what we call pretexting now, of dumpster diving and things like that, to gain access to DEC and download some of their source code, which he eventually got caught and arrested for. And now he has a successful cybersecurity consulting company. So who says crime doesn't pay? So social engineering. This is probably, it's mythology, but may have happened, may not have happened. But this is probably one of the very first sort of thoughts when we think about social engineering, right? Is people giving up, leaving a little gift behind, saying "see you later," and somebody taking that. And if you know the story, you know what happened. If not, there's a movie, and you can watch that. But this is still applicable today. It's just a smaller Trojan horse. This is the idea of baiting or trying to get an individual to do something that they normally would do that is maybe not so secure. There was a study by the University of Illinois a few years ago. They dropped, I think, 297 USB keys into various parking lots around the university campus. On the USB key was a file that would phone home if they launched that document. Of the 297 USB devices left, 98% of them were picked up. 45% of them actually called home. So 45% of the people who found a USB key actually plugged it in and opened the file that was on that USB key. And things like that happen all the time. There we go. There was another one in the States where they, no, I wasn't in the States, it was in London, where they asked people to exchange their password for a chocolate bar. And they had about a 70% success rate there. So, people think, but it's funny, but people laugh and we laugh because we're security professionals. This battery is dying. There we go. We laugh because we hear these things and we think how silly it is. But, to most people, they think that, there's a big IT security department, that manages everything within their organization. And so if they give out their password, it doesn't matter because IT is going to protect them. But it doesn't quite work that way. Who here has gotten a phone call from the CRA? Right? I actually got an email the other day saying that, my tax refund is ready. I haven't even done my taxes yet for the year, so that's interesting. But we get this phone call, right? And there's some information there, and they're urgent. They say you need to sort of respond to this quickly, otherwise the police will arrest you. I actually know somebody who fell for this. Cost them $1,600. Just in case you didn't know this, and if your friends don't know this, make sure that they know. The CRA does not accept Amazon gift cards as a form of payment, and they don't have agents waiting at Tim Hortons for you to drop those things off. So that's exactly what happened. The Shoppers Drug Mart in my neighborhood now has a little sign on the rack of gift cards saying that the CRA does not accept these for payment. So at least it won't happen again. There's prevention in my neighborhood at least. But something that's a little bit more common and something you may have heard of a little bit recently is SIM swapping. Now, SIM swapping might not necessarily seem too much like a social engineering attack because we're taking a SIM card and we're trying to basically transfer a number. But in order to do that, the attacker needs to know a bunch of information about you. And so they may social engineer you, they may phish you, but in general, what they're probably just doing is going on the internet and spending $3 to buy your identity, because that's exactly what they can do today. And that's exactly what happened to the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. He was probably one of the most famous that was caught in this SIM swapping. And you think, wow, they just have my phone number now, but if I have your SIM in my phone, all of a sudden I can download all the apps that you've downloaded, and there's things like Keychain and iOS devices and things like that will then have your banking information all saved in there. And it's very easy then to start getting access to bank accounts and steal money. And this happens on a daily basis in the GTA, Ontario, across Canada, around the world. It is a very easy attack to do if you have some basic information to pass pass that sort of quiz that the telco is going to give you when you try and transfer your number. But phishing is very common, right? There's a number of different ways that these attacks happen. I just realized this is an RBC message. It's not a real RBC message, obviously. I didn't plan this, but this is really something that I'm sure we all have gotten an email like this. Personally, within the organization, we probably have friends that email these things to us and say, "Is this real?" Because I think that happens on a frequent basis. I probably get 2 or 3 of these a week. I probably get more from my friends asking me if it's real than I actually get from people trying to phish me. And I always tell them this is about as real as Bill Gates sending you $1,000 for forwarding an email, because I get those messages as well, and get those on Facebook as well. But this is probably, I think, the stat for last year for Canada was something like 91% of stolen credentials came through a phishing email. But a lot of times it's not just phishing. Sometimes it's just simple ransom. This is actually a good one. I laughed the very first time I got this. I had to dig a little deep to find a G-rated version of this. If you've gotten the X-rated version of this, you probably had a good laugh too. But the thing that's interesting about this one here, and again, stuff that's been redacted, is they have a username and a password. So it seems legitimate. If somebody were to send you an email threatening you with some sort of well, in this case here, some blackmail, and they actually had some specific information like a username and a password that you've used somewhere and that is legitimate, it's like, wow, they actually know stuff. Maybe they actually did get access to my PC. But what it is, it's probably just, again, bought online, go on Pastebin, you can probably find 1,000 different identities that you can copy and paste for free. But again, this is something where from an end user perspective, it's very easy to get fooled into paying this, and there's lots of other examples like this. I'm from Burlington, and one of our lovely city employees was spearfished. So spearfishing is a little bit the same as phishing, except it's a little bit more targeted. So we're looking at not just blanketing or blasting everybody in an organization with a phishing email. We're crafting specific emails targeting specific people within the organization. So again, there's been some, some pretexting done. They've gone into the, the directory of employees. They found who is in charge of accounts payable. And in Burlington, I think it was around November when this happened, the city lost $503,000. And what happened was the city called it a complex phishing email. It probably wasn't that complex. It was just targeted at a specific individual. But that individual was convinced that a vendor or a contractor had changed their bank account information. So they went into their system and changed the bank account number that payments would be sent to. And then they sent the payment for the invoice that was also attached to the email. And so, like I said, sounds complex. It probably really wasn't that complex after all, but it is something that that happens on an all too frequent basis. And so the question becomes, how do we stop this? Obviously, we have tools in place, but we've had tools in place for a long time, and these things continue to happen. We've had education campaigns, and these things continue to happen. And we have new sort of technologies, but these things continue to happen. And so really when we start to look at it, as these attacks evolve, we really need to get deeper into using things like AI and machine learning to respond quicker. It's really easy to set up a new domain, scrape a website to make it look like the RBC sign-in page or the TD sign-in page or PayPal or whoever it might be, and start sending that link out. You can probably do it in about an hour, especially if this is your bread and butter. And so when we are constantly getting bombarded as vendors, as organizations, as service providers, it's very difficult to sort of keep up with that. And so AI is really sort of one of the things, especially when we use machine learning to sort of follow through with these links and look at it like, so here's the Microsoft guy talking again, something like safe links, where we'll take that link that is attached to an email or embedded in an email, and we'll actually follow it and we'll see where it goes, and we'll see that, hey, this looks like an RBC website, but it's not sitting on an RBC-owned domain, as an example, or the information that they're asking for. Using machine learning to sort of look into the what is happening on the other end of that link, to start to block that. That being said, sort of RSA is going on this week, and our CVP of Cybersecurity, Ann Johnson, said that as good as AI is, she doesn't believe that in our lifetime it's going to become a perfect solution. Meaning that things will still get through, and they do today. I mean, we have machine learning-based phishing detections, and we have for a while, and we have AI looking at threat intelligence and threat signals coming in from around the world, but again, it still happens because it's not foolproof yet. And so the other thing that Anne said was, we need to combine AI. We need to take what we can do in AI and add the human intelligence to that. The human element is what's going to give us, the good guys, the advantage. And a lot of that comes from, we have to educate our end users, and we need to continue to educate end users to avoid suspicious emails. I'm glad to take those emails that my friends send me and say, is this real, and be able to respond back to them and say no and educate them and why. And look for simple things like spelling errors and hover over the link and see if it's actually going to the domain that it's referring to. But it also goes to, educating people not to give out information over the phone, right? So, we get the phone call from the CRA saying, hey, you owe us $5,000 and meet us Tim Hortons with gift cards. Maybe you should actually hang up and call the CRA or email them, or go on the website, go on your account on the website and see if you actually owe them money before going through with that. But also just educating your friends that the CRA doesn't do that. They don't send emails. They send letters in the mail that you usually have to sign for. I actually got audited last year, and I got 3 emails from the CRA in the course of a month, and I just delete them. I don't even read them, I just delete them. And then I got the registered letter in the mail saying, you have not responded to our request for information. And so I called them back, and I'm just like, okay, you realize that, you know, email is not the best way to ask for that information. You should be sending a letter because that's what you say we should do. You know, we shouldn't be responding to these emails. And it goes beyond that though, right? Because when we look at a lot of the laws that we have, I mean, they're written when typewriters were invented, right? A lot of the counterfeiting, a lot of the forgery, a lot of the laws around technology were written long before any of this technology actually existed. They're outdated, and I know laws don't really stop the, you know, the really advanced cyber criminals in the nation states, but they do sort of reduce, the amount of stuff that, you know, some of the more amateurs or the, you know, the quote unquote script kiddies from years ago would get into. And when it comes to, I like this photo because this is apparently somebody on our detection and response team. So this is actually a Microsoft photo. So we have, you know, we do have, obviously, you know, from the threat expertise perspective is, you know, there's AI that can do a lot of stuff. There's educating people, but a lot of times we just need actual people who know security inside and out. They know how to respond to threats. They know how to hunt for threats within an organization. And that's where, you know, either our threat expert service, you know, which kind of looks at all of those alerts that are coming into your tenant and does the threat hunting, and will actually, you know, they'll call you, they'll be like, hey, I know it's 4 o'clock in the morning, but you should probably get to the office because it's about to hit the fan. And then when it does, the detection and response team, or DART, who this lovely lady is part of, they actually work side by side with customers, so they'll come on site. So you know when a breach has been detected and data is being exfiltrated, and you're trying to track it down and trying to stop it, they'll actually come on site. And we just published our first case study of something that that they got involved in, where incident responders had been brought in, and it was about 8 months of, you know, whack-a-mole, trying to sort through and stop the attack from happening before DART was called in, and then within a matter of a few days they had things under control. Turned out it was a nation state and attacking a global company, and ended up being, I think, another half dozen advanced persistent threats that had been also involved in the attack. And so they were able to kind of go in and do reactive incident response, but they'll also do proactive investigations. So if you think something's going on and you need some help sort of hunting it down, you know, they'll gladly sort of support that as well. One thing, if you're a Microsoft customer and you have a Premier Services agreement, you have a technical account manager, that's sort of your one throat to choke when stuff goes wrong, whether it is a security incident or Windows keeps crashing, whichever problem it is, there's sort of the person to go to. And so really, as we sort of look at, you know, some things have changed, obviously. You know, we don't have, you know, people rolling up wooden horses to our front doors anymore. They're USB keys now. But a lot of those sort of attacks from yesteryear are still sort of in play today. But we do have things like AI and machine learning to sort of help. And when we can eliminate sort of the low-hanging fruit with those automated investigations and systems, then that's where the actual security experts can do their work and combine that with education and awareness and continued education and awareness. We should be able to slow the flow a little bit.